More than 10,000 of them used in 2022 and 2023 to commit crimes alone. I'm Michael Popok. We got breaking news at the United States Supreme Court level. The Gun Control Act of 1968 passed in the wake of the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination and that of Robert F. Kennedy. To ghost guns, kits you buy to build your gun at home, or in this case, 3D print your gun at home in many circumstances.
What happens when the justices you personally pick to defend gun rights turn around and stab you in the back? Just ask Trump, whose handpicked Justice Gorsuch just led the charge to regulate ghost guns. 7 Supreme Court justices, including 3 that Trump himself put on the bench, just sided with the Biden administration. While Trump was out telling his supporters that his Supreme Court would protect their guns, his own justices were busy writing opinions about why some weapons need regulation. The betrayal is real, folks. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Remember when Trump wouldn't shut up about his Supreme Court picks?
2 members of the United States Supreme Court still want to allow ghost guns created at home from kits without serial numbers to be used to commit crimes in America. Justice Gorsuch, in writing the majority opinion, which upheld the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives Bureau's interpretation that if you're buying a kit to make a gun at home, it should be registered with a serial number and you should be getting a background check.
Oh, they were going to be the greatest defenders of your gun rights in the history of America, the most fantastic protectors of the Second Amendment. Nobody would protect guns better than his judges, believe me, folks. During his presidential campaign, Trump made these enormous promises about his Supreme Court nominees. He kept telling his supporters that they'd be very strong on the Second Amendment, like super duper strong, the strongest. He painted this picture where his justices would basically be walking, talking gun rights shields, ready to smack down any attempt at gun regulation faster than Trump can wolf down a McDonald's meal.
The question here was an arcane one, but it's what the case turned on. Whether the Gun Control Act, as applied to these types of kits, it doesn't mean that by kit, depending upon the type of kit, could there be an argument that it comes out from under the Gun Control Act? Yes. An interesting grouping here, not in the dissent. Alito and Thomas once again find a way to stand for death and destruction in America.
At rally after rally, Trump would get the crowd all worked up about how his judges would protect gun rights like you've never seen before. He'd wave his arms around, do that weird thing with his mouth, and the MAGA crowd would go wild. It was one of his favorite applause lines. Promised them that their guns were safe forever once he got his people on the court. And the funny thing is how specific Trump got about Neil Gorsuch. He didn't just vaguely promise that Gorsuch would be good on guns. No. Trump went out of his way in his tweets to specifically label Gorsuch as a gun rights champion. A champion, like Gorsuch was gonna put on tights and a cape with little guns printed all over them and swoop in to save the day whenever someone suggested maybe we should have background checks. I mean, Trump really went all in on this promise. It wasn't just a throwaway line, it was central to his pitch. When he talked to gun owners, he'd lean in and basically guarantee that his Supreme Court picks would never ever allow any gun regulations to pass. It was like a money back guarantee, except nobody ever gets their money back with Trump, do they?
Forget concealed weapons permits, forget training, forget background checks, forget it all violated unless Alito and the people that joined with him there, and there was a majority, that the Gun Control Act only applies to assembled weapons, the receiver and the frame put together in a gun. When it's only together and can be fired, is it a weapon that can be controlled by the statute? This is reproduced in the actual decision. At the top is an actual firearm. At the bottom is what gets sent to somebody that ordered one of these kits.
And it worked. Gun lobbying groups lined up behind Trump precisely because they believed his Supreme Court appointments would form this impenetrable wall against any gun control measure. The NRA and other gun rights organizations practically drooled over the prospect of a Supreme Court stacked with Trump appointees who would supposedly defend the Second Amendment with their judicial lives. At every opportunity, Trump reinforced this idea that his justices were going to be absolutists on gun rights. No compromise, no middle ground, just pure, unadulterated gun rights forever and ever, and he made it sound like his appointees would sooner set the Constitution on fire than allow any limitation on firearms. It was all part of the Trump brand, the biggest, the best, the most extreme. But here's where things get really interesting. What happens when these same justices, these hand-picked, Trump-approved, supposedly gun-loving judges, actually have to rule on a major gun case? What happens when they're sitting on the bench, looking at real evidence, real laws, and real consequences instead of listening to campaign rhetoric? Well, I'll tell you what happens. Those same 3 justices that Trump picked, the ones he promised would protect gun rights like nobody's business, just voted against him on a major gun regulation case. Not just one of them, not even 2. All 3 of his Supreme Court appointees sided with the Biden administration. Talk about an awkward Thanksgiving dinner conversation. This is like promising your kid a puppy for Christmas and then bringing home 3 cats instead. Except in this case, the cats are highly educated legal minds who apparently have their own ideas about constitutional interpretation. Who could have possibly seen that coming? Besides, literally everyone who understands how the Supreme Court works. I mean, those fancy judicial cats Trump appointed didn't just scratch his Second Amendment promises, they shredded them completely over something called ghost guns. But what are these spooky weapons that got even conservative justices clutching their gavels in horror? Imagine walking into a store and buying what looks like gun parts with no serial numbers, no background check, and walking out completely legally. Then, faster than you can say Second Amendment, you've assembled a fully functioning, untraceable firearm in your garage. Welcome to the terrifying world of ghost gun, DIY weapon kits that let pretty much anyone build a working gun without the government knowing about it. These aren't just parts that kinda sorta resemble guns. The Supreme Court decision actually included photos showing just how minimal the assembly is between the kit you buy and the killing machine you end up with. It's like the difference between a cake mix and a cake. Just add a few minutes and basic tools and voila, you've got yourself an untraceable weapon. The scariest part? Some of these kits can be assembled in as little as 30 minutes using tools you probably already have in your garage. That's less time than it takes to watch an episode of The Apprentice. Though arguably less painful, these aren't complex engineering projects requiring special skills. They're deliberately designed to be simple enough for anyone to put together, which is exactly what makes them so dangerous. These ghost gun manufacturers aren't dumb. They know exactly what they're doing. By shipping nearly complete weapons instead of finished firearms, they've been dancing around gun regulations for years. It's like selling someone all the ingredients for a bomb, but claiming you're just a cooking supply company. The loophole is so obvious, it's amazing it took this long to address it. Law enforcement has been pulling their hair out, trying to solve crimes involving these weapons. When a regular gun is used in a crime, the serial number gives police a trail to follow. With ghost guns, nothing. Zip, zero. It's like trying to catch a criminal who leaves no fingerprints, no DNA, and no witnesses. The gun might as well have appeared out of thin air, hence the spooky name. And this isn't some tiny fringe problem either. 10 years ago, police recovered about 1,000 ghost guns nationwide. By 2021, that number exploded to over 19,000. That's not just growth, that's a ghost gun epidemic spreading faster than Trump's excuses after losing an election. What makes this especially dangerous is how these weapons circumvent the safeguards we've put in place to keep guns away from people who shouldn't have them. Got a history of domestic violence? Can't pass a background check? No problem. Just order yourself a ghost gun kit and you've bypassed the entire system designed to keep guns out of dangerous hands. So what did the Biden administration try to do about this problem? Nothing radical or extreme, just common sense measures that even Trump's own justices couldn't argue with. The regulations simply required ghost gun kits to be treated like what they actually are, guns. That means serial numbers so the weapons can be traced, and background checks so we know who's buying them. Basic safety measures that we've had for other firearms for decades. It's the regulatory equivalent of saying, if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, maybe we should stop pretending it's a goldfish just because it came in a box labeled duck assembly required. The Biden administration wasn't trying to take anyone's guns away, just close an obvious loophole that was creating a serious public safety hazard. And that's precisely why Trump's Supreme Court picks couldn't side with the gun lobby on this one, when the evidence shows that criminals are exploiting a loophole to get untraceable weapons, and all the government wants to do is apply existing gun laws consistently. It becomes hard to justify opposition, even if you were hand-selected by a president who promised gun rights supporters the moon and stars. Imagine Trump's face when he realized who stabbed him in the back. It wasn't some liberal judge, it was Neil Gorsuch, his very own Supreme Court pick. That's right, the same guy Trump bragged would protect gun rights forever ended up writing the majority opinion that just torpedoed his Second Amendment promises. Talk about an awkward family reunion at the next MAGA Christmas party. The Supreme Court's 7-2 decision to uphold Biden's ghost gun regulations wasn't just a slap in Trump's spray-tanned face. It was a full-on betrayal authored by his hand-picked judicial star. Gorsuch didn't just side with the majority, he grabbed the pen and wrote the whole darn thing himself. The orange man must have turned even more orange when he saw that signature at the bottom of the ruling. In his majority opinion, Gorsuch didn't mince words about why these spooky ghost guns needed regulating. He wrote that existing gun control measures Congress found allowed criminals to acquire largely untraceable guns too easily. Sounds like someone's been reading crime statistics instead of Trump's Twitter feed. Gorsuch even emphasized that the government was simply trying to stop criminals from acquiring these untraceable weapons, not take guns from law-abiding citizens. Crazy concept, right? Perhaps most surprising was Gorsuch's history lesson. He reached all the way back to the Gun Control Act of 1968, passed after the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy, arguing that this decades-old law absolutely applies to modern ghost gun kits. Turns out Trump's constitutional originalist actually thinks laws from the 1960s still matter in 2023. Who would have guessed? But wait, there's more. Trump's betrayal wasn't limited to just one judge. His other Supreme Court picks, Kavanaugh and Barrett, also sided with the majority. That's a perfect 3-for-3 score of Trump appointees saying, sorry boss, we actually care about public safety. Remember when Trump told his rally crowds these judges would be his loyal soldiers in the war against gun control? Looks like someone forgot to give the judges that memo. Only Justices Thomas and Alito stood firm in the dissent corner, arguing that ghost gun kits shouldn't be regulated at all. These two were basically saying, what's the big deal about untraceable firearms that criminals love? Freedom. Thomas and Alito must think that background checks are just an annoying formality, like those pesky terms and conditions we all click through without reading. Gorsuch made it crystal clear why regulation matters, stating that the background check requirement seeks to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. Such a controversial statement, right? Apparently Trump expected his judges to believe that criminals should have easy access to untraceable weapons. What a shocker that his Supreme Court picks actually thought gun laws should, prevent crime. What's most fascinating about this whole mess is how Trump's judges prioritize actual public safety concerns over mindless loyalty to gun rights absolutism. When faced with evidence that ghost guns were increasingly being used in crimes, these judges, even the conservative ones Trump hand-selected, couldn't ignore the obvious dangers. They looked at the facts and decided that maybe, just maybe, letting people order untraceable gun parts online without background checks wasn't the greatest idea for public safety. Gun rights groups are having an absolute meltdown over this decision. They thought Trump had secured their agenda for generations by appointing these judges. Instead, they're watching in horror as those same judges show a disturbing tendency to think for themselves and consider public safety. What a concept! The Supreme Court's decision proves that Trump's fantasy of loyal justices bowing to his every wish has hit a big fat wall of reality. The same judges he bragged would be his puppets are thinking for themselves. What a concept! Public opinion shows Americans across political lines actually support background checks and serial numbers for ghost guns. A rare moment when common sense beats political tribalism. Trump's probably throwing a Mar-a-Lago tantrum right now, feeling betrayed by the justices he handpicked. He's been publicly whining about Supreme Court decisions that don't match his expectations, like a toddler who didn't get the toy he wanted. Orange man sad. This ruling shows that even the most conservative judges have a line they won't cross when it comes to untraceable weapons on our streets. Sometimes safety trumps Trump. Who would have thought?